all you.
Okay, so we're officially calling the Public Works Committee meeting to order. And
9:02.
yeah, it's about 9:01.
Still 9 o'clock by my
Yeah,
computer.
yeah, we'll do 9:02 if we're waiting on somebody, but today we're not. So agenda item number one is approval of the minutes from Tuesday, May 18th, 2001. I read them and don't have any, I'm going to want to circle back to some of the things that happened in the last meeting, but I don't have any additions or amendments. Does anyone else?
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes for May 18th, 2001, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The second, as part of the first item, we have public comment. We would remind anybody that has public comment that it's limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment, Kelsey?
We did not have any requests to provide public comment prior to the deadline yesterday.
Okay. All right, then. So then we're going to move on to where are we here? We are on number 2, which is the utility relief request, disputed utility billing fee. And it looks like we have one, if memory serves me. And that is, and before we do a motion on this, I had a couple of questions, but this is the one on East Dawes Street from Cannon Beach 147 LLC. My questions, and anybody else that has questions, please weigh in. Is this is for an apartment, and is this submitted by the owner or the tenant?
This would be submitted by the owner.
By the owner, okay. And do we know how many units are there? That may not matter.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay, it's probably not important.
Normally those things, the LLCs are like there are a few people that own that same house or unit or whatever it is.
Oh,
Sure.
okay. You think it's a fractional ownership, possibly? Okay, got it. And then on this one, sort of similar to a prior request we had, it says a similar occurrence. We had a similar occurrence last July. So this looks like it's sort of the second time in on this. And there's a side comment somewhere in here. Oh, it's right there on the same paragraph that supposedly, I think they said some of someone from the city mentioned that the type of material used in the supply line should not have been allowed. So those are just sort of side comments. If anybody, does anybody want to explore any of those comments before we think any of that's important on this one?
I think, and I approve, would support approval of it. I think it's interesting that they're willing to pay for all that water.
Mhm.
And it's right to give them back, but this sure is not conservation by any means.
Yeah, which kind of goes to the core issue that we're
Exactly.
addressing, hopefully over time here.
I move we approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of approving this request, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Yeah, I think that's the only one, Kelsey.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, back to the agenda. Number 3, Public Works status.
So as most of you guys have seen, we've started the Pacific Gulkana water line replacement. The guys are out working yesterday. We anticipate that being done by the 30th of June. That's our goal, but we've given ourselves a couple of weeks of buffer in case it runs over or we encounter anything we don't anticipate. But that's a pretty straightforward water line replacement. So we think that'll be done pretty quickly. We're getting some feedback and questions relative to the announcements about the rate increase that council voted on for water and wastewater. Not a tremendous amount of feedback, but there are some questions. For some reason, people thought that was exclusive to residential and that businesses wouldn't be impacted. So we're getting those types of questions. We're doing a couple of assessments right now on some projects that are pending out there that we do have money to move forward on, and that's to finish up our drain improvement we made up on 7th and Oak. The engineering company is finalizing that, and we should be able to start on that in the coming months. We're going to time it based on not the summer crowds, of course. See what else, Trevor?
And we just got some asphalt patching happening all throughout town right now.
Yeah, so this is just
So
patching that.
Everything will get buttoned up today. And then we'll start moving forward on overlays, start getting prepped for that.
We got our quotes back yesterday from the last asphalt company that we put bids out for to get quotes for the new budget year's paving that we already discussed with you guys, which streets we'd be doing. And so I'll review those today, and then we'll award that job and schedule those accordingly based on where those streets are located. And that's pretty much it right now. We're just finishing up this budget year and ramping up for the new budget year. So we usually have some lag time in between those two things happening, trying to get all the suppliers to get their invoices in so we get everything booked for this current budget year. And Lori can close out the books and we hit the ground running with our July 1 budget. So that's about it.
Okay.
In the minutes, Karen, we had, once the budget is adopted, Levon said she would provide a list of those projects to committee for tracking purposes, the ones that are approved.
Right. So remember the spreadsheet that we had, when Carolyn was here, we took all the master plan projects and put those on a spreadsheet.
That's this one here.
Whenever we have completed any of those projects, we'll update that spreadsheet. And I think, Kelsey, did we get that on the website?
That spreadsheet is on the website, yes.
Okay, so we had Rusty find us a spot on the website where we could house that and people can see on a regular basis kind of where we are with all of our master plan projects. We've tried to put the projects in the community bulletin, the city bulletin that goes out now, as well as Facebook, to try to have 2 or 3 different avenues where we keep people up to date on projects that are happening on the drawing board and or complete. So we'll keep that going as normal.
I thought what you were talking about was to give us a list of the ones that were approved in the budget.
Right, so you guys saw the adopted budget and those projects are in there, and I gave you the list of the projects that I was taking forward to the budget committee several meetings ago, but I can send that list back out to you guys in email if you want, of just that
Were
inclusive
approved,
list.
was approved.
Sure. Yep, so everything I took forward to them was approved, plus some. They actually added the 7th and Oak to finish that drain work up there. I hadn't taken it forward, but I talked to them about it and told them I would like to see that finished. And so they gave us the money for that. And so, yeah, we were lucky this year. We got money for everything that we asked for. So, and then as loans, those low interest loans kind of come to fruition and we get through all that whole process of paperwork, I'll keep you guys updated as to which loans are coming in, where we start to pull the trigger on those projects that are all infrastructure. Matanuska will probably be the first one that we start on because we already have the loan for the cover. And what I had asked the budget committee for was money to purchase a new generator, because that's an old natural gas generator. And we don't have a backup for that generator if something happens to it and it's terribly deteriorated. So the desire was to replace that before we get the cover, the new cover on that. And so that was granted. And we've also put a FEMA application through for 4 generators that we are asking FEMA for money for. And if we get that, we basically pay ourselves back. If we don't, then it doesn't stop the project from continuing to move forward. So that'll probably be the first pump station that you actually see activity on. And then, of course, we got money for Haystack Pump Station as well. So
So along that line, it's, you know, from my background, it seems like there was at times a struggle between money resources and human and contractor resources trying to execute, so to speak, looking sort of short range and down range, or how's our balance looking there between?
It'll be interesting because when we put the Pacific project out for bid, we had more people bid on it than what we anticipated, but they couldn't necessarily meet the time frame. So it's going to be a balance of their availability and their current workload and what we need to have something complete by, especially when you get to the tail end of the budget like we are now, where we have to have stuff booked by the 30th. But I just think that the workload will be interesting because what I hear from some of the suppliers is, in one respect, building has slowed down because of lumber and steel skyrocketing. And other guys, I hear them say people are making the mad dash to the finish line before it keeps getting worse and worse. And so it's kind of a weird thing that's happening to them right now, but they've all said they've had a big shift in what projects they have on their plate are being rescheduled. And so there's some openings that they have that they wouldn't have had before, but we can get that we can get them to do projects for us. So it'll be interesting. Right now, things are kind of in influx because of the market going crazy. That's the other thing with Matanuska is I did ask the state, because that is federal funding that we got for the cover for Matanuska. I asked them what kind of flexibility I would have because of what's happening with the market. My concern was when I put Matanuska out to bid, that would come back much higher than it was originally estimated because of what's happened with lumber. And that's just going to be a stick frame cover over Matanuska. So I was concerned and I said, do I have some time if I want to wait and see what the market does, where I can put this thing out to bid if I see the market take a dip? And they said yes. So they gave me an email written approval that they would give me some extra time on this project because of what's happening. And so I can either go ahead and put it out to bid and see what it comes back and take that chance, or I can kind of wait and watch the market and then put it out when I know the lumber's coming down. So I'm just watching it right now to see what happens. And if I see it start to tick up, I may just go ahead and say, I got to get it out before it gets any worse. And it's the same thing the rest of our suppliers are dealing with their clients.
Yeah, and availability is probably a problem on some things.
Yeah, and some things like with pipe, what we're experiencing with the Pacific Water Line is the contractor that got that bid, which was McEwen, had to make some quick phone calls around because the 8-inch and 12-inch pipe is extremely difficult to get, especially HDPE. And so he had to call multiple suppliers to be able to get enough pipe to do that project. And it's just a small project. And so we may run into that with some of our infrastructure projects. And we just have to, kind of follow what's happening with the market and try to time things. With Matanuska and its location, it is tricky because the hotel obviously doesn't want us to do this in the midsummer, nor do we. And so we're shooting really for right after Labor Day, September, October. And we don't know what the market's going to be doing at that time. And so we want it timed for the respect and convenience of the hotel, but we also have financial impact here in our timing. And so there's a lot of focus on that right now for me as far as planning, getting that generator and being able to pull the trigger on that.
Interesting.
So,
Go ahead, Trevor.
on a side note, we've started the Sitka stair rebuild. So the stairs have been demoed and
Tell me where that is.
very south end of town, Sitka.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Does that lead down to the beach? I'm just not familiar.
correct.
Mhm.
Okay.
Correct. We
On
demoed
our
the stairs.
old set of stairs.
And Justin Brown, our contractor, is figuring out all the elevations and everything. We'll start pouring concrete here soon. That's supposed to be done before July 1st also. We're anticipating it'll be done before then.
And then in the new budget year, we'll do the ones up on Oak Court. That's another all wood, very old set of stairs that need to be done. So those are the two that we had chased funding for.
Okay.
So that's where we are with projects and kind of what's happening with the market and being able to get supplier help. So far as the suppliers' resources, their employees and whatnot, they've been able to manage. There's a couple suppliers that lost some of their CDL heavy equipment drivers, but they've been able to, get them replaced and get moving again. So it hasn't really impacted our projects. But I hope that only just gets better over the course of time when people start to come back and, go back to work fully stocked,
The Oak Court stairs really is the responsibility of the homeowners association at that point. It wasn't a city project. They should be the one paying for the replacement there.
Well, when we checked into that, we couldn't find anything in writing documented that tied them
Go
to
to
that.
Clackamas County
Mhm.
in the records there, and it's a planned unit development
Okay,
on file there. I don't have any of the old papers, but I was part of the group that put it together, and you can also talk to Reimar. He can tell you.
we called Rhinemar, so I was hoping that we would find something documented that I could kind of lay it back on the neighbors in that area, but we
So is there
weren't.
It's the homeowners association. They're still in existence.
There right now, do you know, is there anyone I can contact that's in charge up there?
I don't know who's in charge of it. They're supposed to report to the city. But you've got, in Clackamas County, you've got all those papers on file.
We
I'm
weren't
gonna
able
call-
to find that, so.
I'm gonna
Maybe
call
Jeff
Tim right
can
now.
help
It's the
us.
same way with anything you do on streets, or they paid for the drainage system and everything.
Okay.
I did have a question on the wastewater plant. We had the aerators going for 2 days and they're still not going. What are we doing to fix the north pond?
It's fixed.
There,
They're just exercising it a couple times a month, just exercising it. But
why don't we switch back and forth?
We're not gonna switch back and forth.
It upsets the plant way too much when we switch back and forth, but all the mechanical equipment in there has been replaced and upgraded, and we have extra parts and pieces on the shelf now. We were able to purchase a significant amount of extra parts and pieces. But as it sits now, we're just exercising the valves a couple times a month. Switching back there and over, I've done that when I was out there and it was a nightmare. But it's ready to go if we need to.
It's supposed to be designed so you can switch back and forth. There's no
Gotcha.
point in having redundancy if you can't switch back and forth. And we made an investment
Time.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's only been used a few hours.
We used it for a whole season. About 7 years ago, we used it for a whole season. We're running both basins at the same time and it didn't work. We also tried flipping back and forth and that didn't work either because it takes several weeks to recuperate and get back to normal. And I don't want to take that chance, especially in the summertime, of discharging something we shouldn't be discharging out there and breaking permit. But as it sits now, if we need to switch over, it could be switched over within a couple hours. It could be switched over.
Are we living within our permit standards?
No, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But not having redundancy is out of permit,
Oh, we do have redundancy because we can switch over.
not in normal operations.
Right.
I've never seen a plant that you couldn't switch back and forth. Even the ponds, the old ponds, we had 2 of them.
Anything else on this topic, which is the public works status? Or anything more from you, Karen? Okay. Anything from the committee? All right, then, down to agenda item number 4, Phase 2 utility billing city accounts. So I think I know what this is about. I think just popped up on the agenda from Kelsey. So whoever has the lead here, take it away.
So back when Carolyn was here, you guys had talked about considering billing for all the city accounts. All of our locations, public works yard, wastewater, public bathrooms, so on, and even the fire department. That was part of her presentation that she did in March to council.
I remember that.
And what they approved us to do at that time was to go ahead and start billing for the public restrooms, but not anything else. So Kelsey worked with finance. They got accounts set up where we can track It's basically, we're not cutting ourselves a check. It's an accounting maneuver where money is going into the enterprise account for those public bathrooms. But it gives the council and the city as a whole a way to really track the usage of those public bathrooms from a water perspective. And so we put that in place. Now what I've asked Bruce to do is ask council if they want to consider any of those other accounts, or if they just want us to hold that and bring it back to them at a later date. I think the only other account that would be worthy of consideration would be the wastewater plant. But they may not want to do that. And we know the pressure that the fire department is under right now. So I'm not sure that they would want to do that either. But I've asked Bruce to bring it up in good of the order to see if there's any action they want us to do on that, or just wait and bring it back to them, say a year from now. So I'm just kind of keeping that on the radar, but just so you guys know, we've kind of completed that full circle of what you started with, evaluating the usage and the new rates. And now we're billing for some of the city accounts. And so I think we've completed that project in essence until they tell me that they're open to us billing for some of the other locations that the city has.
Two quick follow-up questions, just on an order of magnitude. How much water consumption does the wastewater facility,
Quite a bit.
really?
Carolyn
tell you.
actually had it on her presentation. If you guys go back and take a look at that, and I forget what the number was, but it is actually more than what I expected it to be.
That fine screen, whenever the raw sewage comes in, the fine screen machine kicks on, and that uses a significant amount of water. And also the wash downs that happen every week
Okay,
on a weekly basis. We use more than you'd think.
Yeah.
interesting.
The rest of them were pretty minuscule.
Yeah.
I mean, we pulled the reports at that time and just looked over the span of time. I mean, it's almost like we've got one park, I think, that has the spigot out there, that's irrigated,
Yeah.
it's metered, and the rest is public works yard and whatnot. And it's very minimal. So I'm not sure it would even be worth dealing with. But that's got to come from council.
So the other question I have, and this is just basic knowledge for me, is we're now billing, quote unquote, billing for the restroom, and you said that goes into an enterprise account. What is that? Is that something that's available to public works, or is it a holding account with?
It's like our operating account.
Okay,
Yeah, so just like the utility payments that people make, it goes into that same
okay,
bucket.
that sounds good.
Yeah, so that will actually come back to us. That's why I say it's almost like a domino shift, if you will. It's kind of an accounting thing instead of us cutting ourselves a check. But, and we'll have to see when the auditor comes, he may feel differently. He may want us to do that differently. But that's a Lori thing, not a public works thing.
Okay.
20,000 cubic feet average
A month.
month.
Per month.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's more than you think, like, it's,
Yeah,
Are we monitoring the park irrigation? Parks Department irrigation park?
we've only got one
that
that's,
goes through an irrigation meter.
Are we billing that?
it's minuscule. I mean, I'd be surprised we're not billing it. According to the minutes, and you guys can go back and look at the minutes, and I had Kelsey pull it just to make sure we weren't putting anything in there that they didn't want. They specifically called out the public restrooms and nothing else at this time.
Yeah.
So again, like I say, when Bruce brings it up in good of the order, as they may feel differently about it, and then I'll let you guys know if we add any other accounts to that. Probably what I'll do before Bruce brings it up is just get him an updated report of what the usage is at this point.
Actually, I mean, it sounds pretty good. The restrooms to me are very logical.
Yes.
They're not really consumption by the municipality. They're consumption by the public. So that's a good low hanging fruit to
Yeah,
start with. These others, they're
all those
more
are,
gray. Yeah.
yeah, there's a couple ways you could look at that because tourists put pressure on our infrastructure and that translates. to
That's true.
water.
That's true.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways you could look at it, but yeah, I agree. Public bathrooms are almost a no brainer.
Right.
We're still billing Ecola Park, are we?
Yeah.
Okay, so does that conclude that? All right. So item 5 is street condition status update, and we talked about this a little bit last month, and it looks like Kelsey has included probably the prior chart. And this is sort of new territory for me, so I'm going to have a couple of basic questions to start. It looks like in the past, members of this committee and others have done an on-site walking survey and filled out this chart, I assume for the benefit of Public Works, and it looks like a report. It's part of a report that might go to ODOT.
Correct.
Okay. And so just a couple of preliminary questions after I reviewed the chart. I looked at the notes and the codes and scanned it. It looks to me like if it is a gravel road, the condition just isn't noted, just says gravel.
Right.
Okay, because I've seen some gravel roads that are pretty
Yeah,
bad, but-
gravel, but yeah. there's
Okay.
Pretty much.
just,
Our standard maintenance for gravel is very different than what we do with paving, but yeah, I think it's Cruz Flores developed this spreadsheet, so it's been alive for a long time.
okay,
And we've kept it that way just so that we have a really good history of all of our streets and kind of what was gravel, what went to pavement, and how we've taken care of it over the years. And so typically the roads team would update Cruz on what has been improved, and he would update the spreadsheet. And then at some point, Carolyn decided she'd help us out with that, and she basically did an audit throughout the entire town and updated this. And so we have kept it tightly updated ever since she did that. It's been about 4 years ago now.
okay,
And so gravel, we would only note it if the road was really in bad shape. It had washboarded or had a lot of potholes or stuff, but potholes are pretty typical.
Mhm.
So we don't usually track those on here. But if it needed to be graded and get the crown back because there's problematic water flow or something, then we'd probably note it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we don't put a whole lot.
like street in front of my house, the city did a lot of sewer work about 2 years ago, which is very much appreciated, but now you can see where
Right.
it's settling, where the prior trenching was, so I don't,
Yeah, and when they do stuff like that, once it's all said and done, what they typically do is they add it to their list of going back and they got to reestablish the crown. And they usually put some more rock on it. They contour it to get it back in shape. And so, but we don't typically track that here unless it's of significant cost,
Okay.
and then we would track it.
all right, so by and large, this is.
Pretty much,
Anyway, this is focused on asphalt, okay,
yeah, overlays and dig outs, re-asphalt. Mhm.
okay. See, my other question was, going through the chart here, it says reference number and map number. So is there something else that goes with this that helps the,
At the time, they were using a GIS mapping system when we first got GIS, and they related it to a page number. The guys aren't using that anymore. They just basically go block to block. So what's between Hemlock and Spruce, or what's between your mains when you're an arterial street, and if you're a main drag, between what your side streets are. So they're just doing your cross streets block to block.
okay. So if a party is, if there's a team out there looking, everybody's going to know where, for example, West Second between North Larch and North Hemlock is. Okay, all right. I'm sure I could find it, but,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so there's no supplement to this, just,
No.
okay. So I think what we talked about, and I think, Janae, you brought it up, that you'd like to get this going. So maybe I'll turn it over to you for a second. I don't,
No, yeah, I think we should get going on those. I mean, what else do we have to do? Less is not. But yeah, we can divide it into, actually, we don't have to be teams. We can just divide it into sections and then, just give back to Public Works. So you pick your section and then you get it done, and then you pick your section, you get it done. And I pick my section and you all pick our sections.
okay.
It's that simple.
personally, I kind of like the team approach, since you're going to evaluate, it's like giving a grade, A to whatever. So that there's consensus between the two people. So I'm thinking maybe in terms of actually scheduling this, obviously it's much more pleasant to do it between now and say mid-October. But maybe wait till Amber. So we get so we can split up into teams, because there'll be four of us, and 4 divided by 2 is 2, right? So. Okay, so Kelsey, maybe we put that on next month's agenda. Hopefully everybody will be here. So that would be like scheduling and teaming for street inspections or something like that. Does that sound okay, Janae?
That's fine with me. I'm fine either way.
Okay, what do you think, Stu? I like to do it in teams. That's the way it's been done in the past. I want to make sure I'm not, okay. All right.
Yeah, that was better, like second input.
With you, 3rd Street to the First Street Bridge really is getting bad shape, and I can walk that with you, and anytime you're ready,
Okay.
so we'll schedule that. Even though I'm not on the committee, I can still offer
That's
advice.
correct. Yes, you can be
Yeah.
my partner.
Seems appropriate.
Had ODOT did their annual inspection, because they do inspections of the bridges throughout the North Coast. They just completed their inspection and gave us a report on that, and we're pursuing the items that were on the report. They were all minor cosmetic, maintenance type things, with the exception of one, and that's being evaluated by a bridge company that makes repairs. They think that there may have been an error in their inspection process, so they're verifying what was sent to us. It has to do with some coated cabling that they want us to repair. And so the bridge is actually in pretty good shape. I mean, surprisingly, I know some of the locals may not feel that way, but the people that maintain these bridges for a living have said this bridge is in good shape. So it is not seismically sound for what today's seismic retrofitting expectations would be. But from a maintenance and its upkeep and whatnot, it's in good shape. So it'd be a matter of if the city decides that they want to pursue having it properly retrofitted or not. It would be quite an undertaking at that location. But anyway, in the meantime, we continue to have it inspected every year. That's something that the state requires. It's not an option for us. So obviously it's something that we support and want done. They don't charge us for that. And then we get a very detailed, comprehensive report. And so, like I say, then we're pursuing getting the folks that would come out and actually do the repairs. It's not something we would ever do in-house. And so, yeah, that's.
You have a really excellent two reports on repair of the First Street Bridge.
That's the.
How you can handle that one. Because it's in any earthquake, it's going to slide
Mhm.
upstream, and it told how to tie that down. Dan did some of that, but we didn't do all of it.
Right.
The other one that you really need to watch to make sure that they're paying attention to it is Highway 101 over Ecola Creek. If you've ever been underneath that bridge when cars are moving across it, it's on toothpicks and really moves around, and it is
Yeah.
not gonna last an earthquake, but they've been worried about it just with normal traffic. So it should be something the city keeps after the state
Right.
to inspect.
Well, I know the state was lucky enough that the feds gave money. It's probably been 10 years now that they started giving money for all the earthquake retrofitting to all the bridges throughout each individual state. And so that has been in place for a number of years now, and it's still ongoing. I mean, obviously, it's going to take decades to complete that, but they prioritized it. And obviously, the most major bridges of highways in the metropolitan cities and whatnot. But it has come to the smaller, more rural areas as well. And so all the bridges except Fur is owned by ODOT that surround us. And Les is right. We keep track of those because that's our way in and our way out. And they've been very aggressive about the repairs to their bridges. What I'd like to see is the city of Cannon Beach make a decision on what direction they want to go with our First Street Bridge. And then we kind of know from an interior perspective and our own ownership of our own bridge, kind of if we're going to stay in concert with what they're doing in the greater part of the state, or if they're going to take a different route. So that is something that we try to keep in front of them as well when we talk about resiliency and emergency preparedness. So.
Okay.
We can kind of give you guys some a crash course of road review. You know, when you go out and look at roads and some of the terms, when you see the spidering effect in the streets, when you see the sinkholes, there's a difference between a pothole and a sinkhole. Pothole is usually the asphalt's broken open, and a sinkhole is it's depressed, but the asphalt may still be intact, but it's cracked. And so as you update the sheet, then we all kind of know what everybody's looking at. And so when,
That's a great idea, Karen.
yeah, so when Carolyn went out, we kind of,
Everybody's in the same, picture.
yeah, so we'll do a little crash course before you guys hit the street and go review. And I think Carolyn probably had some helpers, you know, I don't know who they were, but I think they took the town map and they kind of divided it from this street north, you do it. Here in Midtown between these streets, you do it, and so on and so forth. And so that's an approach you guys might consider to make it a little easier on you. And then as we do the patching, or if you guys haven't gotten to it by the time we pull the trigger on our asphalt repair for the new year, I'll just keep updating this and then give you a most recent copy before you actually hit the street and go out and take a look. Usually when we're out and about and we see a street that's really bad, I'll write it down or I'll send myself a text so that when I get back in, I can go in and make some other comments on this. Because like I say, when we have projects or there's home builds and they're having to cut across the street to run utilities or whatnot, if it's not repaired properly, we make that contractor come back out and repair it, because all it does is end up plaguing us down the road when that sinks. You know? So, but we've been pretty good about updating this since Carolyn did a complete town audit, and it hadn't been updated in about 3 years. So really,
When she did that, she just walked the streets herself.
yeah, I like it. And then you guys
Have
can kind of
anybody with her?
see. That's why I like to bring the streets to you that we're contemplating paving, so that you can actually go out and see what the condition is and what led to that condition. Sometimes there's bellies in our sewer lines that cause a depression in the street. But most often it's just age and or what's underneath the streets here. So
Just make sure I understand. You said the crash course in criteria. Is that something that you or Trevor would do here, or?
yeah, we'll do it during one of your meetings. And so just let me know what your time frame is that you think you want to hit the street and start doing it. And so we can either do at the end of one of our sessions here and just kind of give you a crash course on it.
Okay.
Or send you I can send some stuff out in the email and say, okay, these are the things you'd be looking for, the terms. This is how we look at it when we look at a street. And so you can look at it both from a resident and then from a public works perspective.
Since we're going to talk about scheduling next month, would it be unreasonable to get that criteria
Sure,
next meeting?
absolutely.
So Kelsey, could you add that? It would be plus description of criteria from street criteria condition from Public Works or something like
Yeah.
that. So that if we decide to schedule something, we have
Yes,
the knowledge.
evaluation.
Yeah. Steve, you had some, I saw you.
Yeah, I just agree that we should have maybe a list so we're consistent on our descriptions. rating on that. So if there's a list of vernacular or,
Yeah.
words that are used to interpret street condition, then
Yeah.
wanted to reiterate that.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll do that next month along with hopefully the scheduling.
Thing that, when you're looking at the streets, most of them are just surface type of things. But there are places where the base is failing. And that's why on First Street Bridge and through there, it's the base that's disappearing. And that's important to note, because that means excavating and putting in new base. And it's really on the high traffic areas.
be a dig out.
The other ones are just potholes and surface things.
I've noticed some,
Asphalt off and then reestablish a good compacted base.
sloughing too that goes on a couple of the streets
Mm-hmm.
in the area.
Yeah,
On the edges.
Yeah, well, like the Cola Park Road, for instance, there's that one part that just to keep being repaired. There's an active slide there, it looks like, and I don't know how you would repair that, but it probably should be noted that it's an ongoing observation and continued repair.
ODOT actually owns that, and so we stay on them pretty aggressively when that gets really bad. But it's just an ongoing maintenance for them. That's going to be a big repair for them when the time comes, because they need to address the slide. And until they do that, both the lower and the upper road is Hemlock, which we own, that we had to peel the asphalt off of because it's got so problematic with water getting underneath it, just causing it to really be bad. And big wide open cracks. So we took it off. Now we just maintain it with compacted gravel. And so we kind of work in concert with each other because the slide is up high and it's affecting both those lower roads, but it's going to be a very expensive repair. They've asked for federal funding. They've asked for infrastructure funding in this round that all of us asked for money to be able to address that slide. So hopefully, that will happen.
Karen and I disagree, but the city is the one that caused the slide. They still do. It's like the S curves down here. And the only way we were able to do it was the city put in dewatering pipelines underneath the slide area so that you drain the slide area. What we've done is put the gravel in, don't have the curves, and all the water is dumped on to the slide, which just makes the slide heavier, and it's continually moving. It's been going for 5 years, and it's still, in my lifetime, I hope to see that.
Understood.
Sounds expensive.
It is.
It is.
Question, it is, but there's also probably in stimulus funds, there would be extra funds to do it. But the city has, I think, in my retired professional opinion, they're the ones that caused the slide. Joy Gannon, when she put it in, was a bad choice to develop that road. And we didn't have the slide until the road was developed.
Okay, street condition status update was number 5 on the agenda. Is there anything more on that? I think we've got a plan for next month. We okay? All right. And so if we move on to the next one, we're going to be pretty close to finishing on time. Utility relief request form and ordinance update. Again, what I've been thinking there is we're sort of ramping our way to October. That's a loose date, October being the time when the Ion Water is completed.
Yeah.
So I'm not personally in a big rush to come to a conclusion here because it is a complex balancing act. I look back at the minutes from last month and it kind of displays how we're all, I won't say struggling, but we're trying to balance a lot of different considerations here. I looked at the public works status. Karen, you mentioned that the city had written off 25,000, let's see, since 2017, 25,000 utility relief request. And now you point out in 2021, for 4 months, it's already higher than any of the other single year totals, if I'm quoting that right. And then you mentioned Ecola Creek Lodge has had 5 utility requests since 2017. And you talked about maybe the probable possible appropriateness of adding some restrictions on the number of requests. And then near the end of the meeting, when we're actually talking about this, Trevor, I talked about maybe using ion water as an incentive for people to address any leaks. You mentioned that some people are going to have trouble signing up for ion water because they don't have a computer or smartphone.
Along with that, the billing.
Yeah,
If they don't have a computer, smartphone, they can't do the automatic billing.
Karen, go ahead. Karen mentioned that she would like to see a water conservation aspect to the ordinance, not just in the form. Fowler asked about Ecola Creek Lodge having the 5 requests. And Trevor mentioned that some people continue to allow water to leak because they can afford the bill instead of getting the leak fixed. Trevor mentioned that his preference is that simple is good in regard to policies that's the city, so that the city can easily enforce them. The only reason I go through that is we've got this conservation consideration that is important. We also have sort of the somewhat human interest part that's important. We have maybe the frequent flyer offenders that is important. And, you know, it's going to be difficult, but not impossible to address all that. So what I'd like to do for myself, and I would encourage every other committee member, if they want to, is I'm thinking like on the next meeting, and this is just total straw man, nothing to be moved on, nothing to vote on, but each of us come up with what we think the ordinance and or form or both could look like to balance those considerations. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe just leave it the way it is. You know, that's always an option. Just because otherwise I'm afraid we're just going to keep discussing it. I mean, just bring something written down. What do you think it should look like? But it wouldn't be a decision meeting, so I don't want to, violate any public comment thing, just kind of a work session. And then maybe we'll just take it all, throw it in the wastebasket afterwards. I don't know. But I think that's a way of moving it incrementally on towards October, because we're coming up on July, right? Does that sound okay with everybody?
One thing I noticed when I was watching the video of last month's meeting is that I believe it was Trevor who said that the form looks good and you like the form and its simplicity and relative completeness for a form. What I noticed is that the ordinance, though, didn't seem to match what the form was requiring.
Yeah,
Days.
that was one of my comments. They're not melded together very well. Yes.
That's why leaving the ordinance as is really not an option, because we need to get those two synced up. And so we either change the form or change the ordinance. And if we've already established that the form is good,
Exactly.
then we've got to change the ordinance. And at a minimum, I would ask the committee to consider limiting the number of submissions that a person can do. Most other cities have a limit of how many you can submit. And that was my point of giving you guys that report, is to show you how many repeat submissions we have for the same customer. And so I would strongly encourage you to consider adding that to the ordinance. So at a minimum, if you don't change anything else, change that.
Okay.
That would drive the conservation we're looking for. And it would drive people to repair pipes that need to be repaired, that are solely their responsibility, not the city's. So
Maybe something else I was considering that might enhance conservation and encourage people to repair their leaks is a more onerous tiered structure for billing. That seems to get people's attention sometimes if they, if they could save, because there was a distinct difference between the cubic water usage for the amount the leak is causing versus their regular use. They could bring that down. Maybe the folks that still could afford it would still not do it, but it would certainly be an incentive for most people, I think.
That was actually part of the committee's process when they ended up where they ended up with the cubic feet for everybody. This recent change is to either do the tier or to have the same cubic feet across the board for everybody. And so I think they've been there, done that on that evaluation. But not to say that we wouldn't look at that again down the road if people feel that we're just not driving the conservation that we're striving for. It's a challenge because we're not running short on water, but we don't know what Mother Nature is going to deal us with so many changes that we're seeing. So, the 5-year consumption report that we do with the state every single 5-year increment has repeatedly shown for history that Cannon Beach is in great shape for water. But again, we don't know when that will change.
Yeah.
At some point, that very topic may have to come back to the table for consideration. Is if we see that our creek begins to be stressed and limited with the water that we're receiving in the springs, or for any reason something happens that jeopardizes the head end where our springs are fed, this would have to be considered. And so I wouldn't say it's off the table forever, but I think in the exercise that the committee just got through with, and that was based on our rate changes, I think we've kind of made that decision for now.
Okay.
But I appreciate you bringing that up and recognizing that.
Apparently. Yeah, and I think your comment about not waiting until we do have a problem to,
Exactly.
address conservation and kind of things.
Yep. Jan Siebert Warman is one of our residents that's very passionate about that. And when we started this and we started our the pursuit of funding to change out our meter modules, I promised her that conservation was going to be a big part of this effort. And I'd like to deliver on that promise. I think we've done many things that have lent itself to that. But I think by changing this ordinance and limiting people on the number of requests they can send in would go a long way in supporting that and setting an expectation. Yeah.
Push.
Exactly.
I agree. Totally.
Remember, if you lose the springs, we still have the pumping facilities to take from the creek itself.
Mhm.
There is a backup in the existing treatment plant, water treatment plant on the hill there. It can handle water and purify it to drinking water standards without any trouble at all. So it's not only the springs, which you can lose in the earthquake, but it's you got the backup.
Would that be adequate to replace how much percent of the current water that we're using?
100%.
100%?
And if not, you can expand the pumps and there's dual pumps there and there's extra capacity. That big pond that's there is treatment itself.
Right.
So you're backed up with 100% replacement. Now, your biggest worry on that is the transmission line coming down right now. That's one that needs to be paralleled.
Yeah.
So if we did lose a certain percentage of our total water that we needed for drinking, is there an emergency provision that the city can implement in that plan?
Oh, yeah.
We pull from the creek, and that's part of our emergency preparedness plans now. Obviously, that's why we're doing the seismic valves, one on each of our tanks to preserve what's in the tank already. Like Trevor
I
says.
forget what the amount of GPMs we can pull from the creek, but it's equal to what we are receiving from the springs right now. So we could
Pretty
be
close.
fine pulling from the creek.
It's got two branches to the creek too, not just the spring. In the master water plan, they talk about desalinization. That is not a good option for you. You've got plenty of water from the creek and you've got treatment facilities there right now that are very good.
Okay, good.
So I want to remind everybody is that the process that we currently exercise today prior to Ion Water, which is we get the leak status report and Daryl makes a phone call to each of the people that are on that report, that will continue. even after everybody is fully implemented with their new modules and they have Ion Water available to them, for anybody that is not tech savvy, Daryl's still going to make those calls because
That's great.
we don't see those come off the list. That's another way for him to prompt them to move forward and make their repairs. And so don't worry too much about the folks that aren't going to be able to do this, because we recognize that not 100% are going to be able to do it. They're still going to have us as a safety net, holding them along. But it's setting that expectation that when they've been notified, we expect them to take action. So
That's good for the conservation side, obviously, because you're not letting it go. And it's also good for the customer to kind of mitigate their liability. So yeah,
yeah, because
continuing that would be great.
people may think that they have it fixed and they may have more than one leak. So they have isolated something and they go, oh, here it is. It's in my irrigation, and they fix it. And they end up being on the leak list the next month and they realize, oh no, I got another leak, you know? And so, you know, it wouldn't be unusual for them to be on there twice. But any more than that, probably not, you know? And so that's what Daryl's for. And he enjoys calling people, enjoys helping them isolate. It's really his thing and he's good at it. So that's not going to go away. And so if you hear people ask, or they're worried about that, I've tried to reiterate to folks that as long as we have Daryl, but you know what?
Rid of Daryl.
Even when Daryl retires, believe me, he's bringing up his next iteration.
Good. That's important. That's important.
He'll have his other brother.
His
Daryl.
other brother.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right. So Kelsey, for next month, go ahead and just put utility relief request form and ordinance update again, and we'll discuss this some more, hopefully with some sort of straw man suggestions. And I would say maybe 20 minutes might be better on.
And if you guys can get down on paper the things that you'd really like to see in the ordinance, we can help you word it.
There we
Don't get
go.
hung up on trying to get it worded perfectly. Just say, look, Karen, these are the things we feel need to be in this ordinance. This needs to come out. This needs to go in.
Right.
We'll help you get it all worded.
Right. And we can't decide anyway. This all ultimately would have to go to council anyway. So,
Right.
but yeah, it'd be nice if we sent a nice package there and say we thought it out in
Yeah.
depth.
Because really, like I mentioned to you guys before, this was a hard push to get council and budget committee to really consider this project. And I want to bring it full circle to say,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I like it.
your investment has paid off. And let me show you how.
Yeah.
Because people have fixed their leaks faster. They're more aware of it now. There's been less damage to not only city infrastructure, but to private property. So it's a win-win all the way around. And I want to be able to take that full circle to them. Not only did we think this was going to cost us $650,000 and it's costing us just over $300,000, and we got a low interest loan, 50% principal forgiveness. I mean, this has been a good project, and I just want to kind of bring that back to them with a bow and say, thank you for giving me the money.
Mhm.
And that has to end with the ordinance, setting that expectation. And then to be able to say to Jan, now we've taken that next step in water conservation.
Yeah.
And we get credit for that in that 5-year report that goes to the state. We get big credit for that because they want us to show projects that we've done that's driving conservation. And this has been one of them.
I think the whole accumulate,
Great project all the way around.
I think the whole, on the water conservation side, I look at it as sort of a holistic package, starting with the leak detection
Mhm.
3 years ago that
Yep.
seemed to drastically reduce.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was huge.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, hypothetically, if we were looking at maybe a small relief for homeowners and so forth, if you look at the whole package, the leak detection, maybe limiting the number of times people can come in. What does the whole package look like in terms of water conservation as compared to 3 or 4 years ago? I think it's going to be big,
Yeah.
really big.
And then what will really be the finale of that is in budget year 22-23, when we bring that leak detection company back and they do another look in town and we compare that over the previous 2 that we did, we should see a significant change.
Yeah.
And hopefully by that time, we'll have made some strides on our water line replacement. And so you'll start seeing that shift.
Right.
And so it will be a great success story. So,
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Okay, anything else before we move on to good of the order? Okay, hearing none. Looks like Trevor left for a minute. I don't think I'll,
be right back.
yeah, I think he just got for a minute. I'm going to wait for him to get back. That's okay. We're it's sort of a special thing here. We'll give him a minute to get back. He's not back in 1 minute.
Okay.
So,
With Bruce here, is there an update on your suit, Karen?
My what?
Soon.
It came out yesterday that the Ethics Commission dismissed those claims that were made against me. And so it's,
Not all of them,
I'm sorry,
not all of them.
in both cases. The first one, we're waiting for the final document. I've already seen it in draft, and so has the attorneys. And so we're just waiting for the commission signs off on it in their July 23rd meeting. And so it's been decided. I have no more to tell you on that.
Bruce, is that correct?
Yes.
okay.
To talk about that situation, I don't know how much y'all know, but the initial complaint was completely wrong. What happened is that at a meeting on March 22nd, council decided to close down the city to visitors. And I walked out of this meeting, Karen was in her office, and I told her to contact Cannon Beach Design and get the signs up as quickly as possible. In fact, they were up by dawn the next morning, at each entrance saying that the city was closed. So I gave her specific direction. The allegation was that in that case, Karen didn't follow procedures, didn't go to the design review board, didn't do all these other steps in order for her to give work to her husband's business. And
It was Karen's business though, too, isn't it? You're a co-owner?
I'm a co-owner.
well, regardless, she had.
Well, that's an important point, Bruce.
Well, it's not an important point because she didn't have anything to do with the decision. It was all my direction to her. The allegation was that she went off on her own and then didn't follow a bunch of the processes, none of which we ever followed. I don't know where the person got the information, but it was my direction to her is what caused her to move forward with that. What they found is a possible technical violation because while we all knew about that connection, the way the law reads is every time, like if you all asked her about a sign today, she's obligated by law to send you an email or something in writing saying there's potential for a conflict. And we all knew that there was the potential conflict was there. We changed our procedures to work around that. So the purpose, in my opinion, this is a personal grudge that a person has against Karen. There's been multiple things that the actions that the person has taken. This was just one. I understand that he's filed another complaint. He's just after Karen.
I think that's right. The thing, we had a whole term of ethics in engineering. And one of the things is contract so that you're not promoting yourself in order for your company to
Yes.
prosper by it. When I was city engineer, that was under contract. And I was not an owner at the time, but we were very careful if anything came up that we didn't exceed the scope of our contract. And we were the only ones in the area that could provide that service. And they went through a selection procedure. It isn't like it is today. It's much tougher today. You've got to legally, by the codes, you have to get bids from a number of companies unless there's nobody else here. But there's also, if you've got a contract, like with copies and facts, where you agree with them that they're going to do city work for you, then that's okay. But it's not where you're profiting by that. And I think, Karen, that's where it hasn't been explained, because I'm getting more questions on this that I can't answer.
Well, I can answer those for you, Les, and I can say that from the day I was interviewed for this employment here at the city, when I was the Assistant Public Works Director, my director at that time, Jim Arndt, I disclosed to him that if I was a Public Works employee and I had to deal with signs, that my husband owned the business downtown and I was a co-owner in that business. When he offered me the job, we established a process here at the city that precludes me from awarding work, signing invoices, authorizing anything associated with work connecting to that business. And we have abided by that. The investigation looked deeply into that. There was no wrongdoing found in that whatsoever. What the issue was I did not declare it in writing, as I had done many times in other situations, as well as verbal, and we had the process in place. It was a technicality. And when the hearing was conducted, they offered that to us as a solution to close this. It was a minor technicality. It wasn't something that the attorneys negotiated to try to get out of punishment. The commission offered that to us.
I think one of the things that we're forgetting, this is not something that, it was like weeks, months. It was just basically an overnight thing.
Yes,
It was
under an emergency order.
And it was done. And so we need to remind ourselves that it was an emergency. It was done by Bruce's authority. So I'm not sure why we continue doing this, but if anybody will ask you, Les, that's what I would say. You're not putting yourself in that situation. Plus, it was an emergency. Call it a day. If they wanted to.
Did the company design?
The other thing I'd like to address, Les, that you said is the procurement laws for the state of Oregon.
Mhm.
I know the procurement laws for the state of Washington and Oregon. In fact, most states in the United States, because that was part of my previous employment responsibility as an executive with the telecommunications company. I had project management, what we called procurement at the time. So I'm very familiar with the state laws as I continue to be for this job. I went to a training class that taught me Oregon's procurement laws when I came to work for the city of Cannon Beach. So I know them well. And what the law states is anything under $10,000, Bruce and or I or any other city staff member has the authority to direct award that bid to a person. In this case, that would not apply to me and Cannon Beach Design because I am a co-owner of that business. But under any other circumstances, we have the authority to direct award a job that's $10,000 or less. This was under an emergency order. And Bruce had the authority to do everything that he had done. That's what the thorough investigation found. And the matter is closed. I will continue to abide by those rules and those laws.
I'm not trying to attack you at all. I'm trying to get answers for.
And I'm trying to
questions
answer
that
those.
people are asking. Did your company design the sign then? Is that one thing that you had? Was there anybody else in the area that could have designed that sign?
Most-
It doesn't matter, Les, that was my call. And at the meeting, they passed resolution 2020-09, and specifically said that all purchasing requirements in the code and all that stuff, the city manager had the ability to waive those requirements, which I didn't even do in this case because the signs, I think, were like $900. So it was well under the amount. I had the authority to go ahead and give that direction to Karen without any consideration for any purchasing requirements. It was tied directly to the day before when we had all those people in town. And the big thing here is that, we're talking about kind of a hypothetical, but what happened is the person misrepresented the facts about what happened that day, saying that Karen didn't follow this procedure, didn't go to this committee, all these other things, and awarded the work to her husband. She did none of that. None of that stuff is even in our code to be able to have to do. And I just told her, get these signs done. They want to shut the town down right now. And it was done by dawn the next morning for like $907. So the issue is that the person made these allegations, like all these other things happened, and they didn't. It was a completely different process. And there's a background, with this individual in Karen, and it's still continuing on.
And for the last bit of information that I will share with this, and I hope we can close this topic and end our meeting on a more positive note, since this is our last meeting that you'll be joining us for, Les, is during the Ethics Commission hearing, the commissioners decided to modify that particular ORS for this very reason. And what they're modifying is the fact that you would have to put in writing every single time this presents itself. Because as a public works director, I could be sending documents, 10, 12, 14 emails a day declaring a potential conflict of interest because I deal with signs for my job. So that even the possibility that Cannon Beach Design Company would make something for us, I have to declare it. There's many other people in the state of Oregon that are just like me. And the commissions decided that that is a difficult part of that ORS, that if there's a process in place like what we have that's been shown and proven and working, and that I have verbally declared it, that you won't have to put it in writing. They are in the process of changing that ORS as we speak for this reason.
And they also they did a training here on site, ethics training, and that was not mentioned.
Yes.
There was no, there's a lot of discussion about things, but the fact you have to put it in writing every time was not, mentioned as a requirement.
Right.
Did she actually go ahead and let us know that there's a possibility? Yes, that was done. And in fact, Trevor is the one that signs as the department head on anything he signs, and I have to sign off on every sign off. Karen's completely out of the process. And
So
has been for a long time.
So it's a technicality. It's done because the ORS stands. They have to abide by that today. That's why they offered that to me as a solution until that ORS is changed. And I said I would accept that.
And they also recognized that Karen had no decision-making power or no role in that instance. So it was like, so why should she have to go ahead and put it in writing? She was given a direct order by supervisor. So anyway, I hope we can get past this now.
Okay, anything else on the good of the order before we conclude? I mean, we have one other item for sure. Trevor, no?
I have an item.
Okay, go ahead, Karen.
Plus, I would like to thank you for all the time that you've given the Public Works Committee and me in particular, the support and the guidance and your knowledge of this town and the infrastructure has been greatly appreciated. And so I have a little something for you here, and we have some morning coffee cake you guys can enjoy after the meeting. Thank you, Les.
Thank you.
And just to add on to that, what we called that in the federal government and what is called in the corporate world too, or in any government, it's called institutional knowledge. And it's something that you can't create. And doesn't matter how good your computers are or anything else. It's kind of exists in the person's brain. And so we're going to miss that a lot. And we'll have to fill that void somehow, but it'll never be completely filled. So thank you for everything you did, Les.
It's only 60 years since 1958.
That's institutional knowledge. That's right.
Cannon Beach has always been dear to my heart. Was really where I, as a 22-year-old young engineer, got thrown into the job by Lark because another employee got in trouble with two wives in Hood River. So I ended up here in Canada.
Sounds like a
That
story.
sounds like fun.
Yeah.
It was really the Don Erickson, the city council at the time that just welcomed me in. And I grew up with the project and bought property. The property my house is on was partner and professor at Oregon State. And he's the one that recommended that we come down here with my 3-month-old daughter at the time.
Mhm.
So it was really the cornerstone of my career. And I say in all honesty that it's bad when it shows up on the front page of the paper. And one of the things that Jim Howland said at CH2M was you never want to read about it in the newspaper about something that your company has done badly. And to protect your ethics and your dedication, you have to be very careful on what you're doing. And that I understand that you got in a bad spot, but it's also, Bruce, it's hasn't been explained to the city, even though you say it went through the council and everything. I didn't know about it. During the pandemic, things aren't, and it's understandable when it's an emergency. But that's still not coming through in the paper story even today.
Maybe they'll.
Parents being attacked, and it shouldn't happen.
Okay.
And I understand that, but there's times when, as a professional engineer, I excuse myself here in this committee and such, because there was potential conflict with my old company, not only that, even though I retired. So it's something that we hold dear as engineers, or ethics, and are doing the right thing. And things change all the time. Bruce, I wish we could convince the paper not to keep running the story, and it shows up in the Oregonian too. I think
I thought that I sent something out.
you did. You sent a long thing down.
Right, so I mean, I did send something out to all the committees, so you had the information.
Yeah, I've got it right here.
Right, so I did.
It came through printed badly, but that's where a printer does. Anyway, thank you very much. And I'm afraid you'll still see me sitting in the audience, kibitzing on what you're doing. And I still hope that I get called upon to ask where'd that outfall go and why we're doing this and that.
You will. Don't worry.
All right. Well, thank you, Les. And thanks again for your service, and look forward to seeing you down the road. Anything else for good of the order? Okay, then we stand adjourned until next month. Thank you.
Right.
Only interested, and I expect you to sign up for the Red Cross as a volunteer.